Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Raquel. So today, you guys, I'm going to be talking about ancestor altars and hoodoo, how to get it started, what it is, how to maintain it, where to put it, stuff like that. And I really just want to get right to it, get right to the meat and potatoes, y'all, because it is getting like super late. It's getting super late, and like I don't want my neighbors to hear me. I don't. Oh my god. If they can hear me, I would feel so bad because it's so late. And you know, people, they be getting up early on Sunday to do what they have to do. So, I don't know. I'm like that neighbor. Like, I'm definitely not gonna ask for like a cup of sugar type of neighbor, but I'm also very much like a respectful neighbor that mind my business and just try to be considerate, especially like when you live in an apartment. So it's like, I hope they can hear me. Oh my god. But anyway, I want to talk about altars, ancestor altars and hoodoo. So to just backtrack or whatever, if you don't know what an altar is, an altar in general is just like a sacred space that people use in various religions, even the major ones, and in different spiritual practices. So just a lot of religions, a lot of spiritual practices, they use an altar. And basically it's just a sacred space that is used to be like a middle ground between the spiritual realm and the physical realm. So in terms of like altars within hoodoo, there is different type of altars that you can have. Like there are certain type of altars that is specific to certain type of energies, right? So you could have an altar that is for love, you could have an altar that is for money, you can have an altar that is for protection, then you can have an altar that is for like specific type of community ancestors, you can have an altar that is for certain type of angels, right? But being that the ancestors are like the base of hoodoo, they are what kind of like stabilize your journey within hoodoo, it's best to prioritize your ancestors and prioritize having that type of altar when the time is right for you to have that type of altar before anything else, if that makes sense. And so that's kind of why I'm really just making this video specifically about ancestor altars. So when it comes to this ancestor altar, there is so many different ways that we can utilize the altar, and there's so many different reasons for why people have it. And one of those reasons is to show reverence. So that's basically like just showing honor and respect for our family members that have passed on and the ones that came before us. Because a lot of the times, you know, people in your family, they'll sometimes like pass away, and you know, every blue moon or whatever, sometimes they'll come up in conversation or whatever, or we have their picture, we have the obituary, and it's just like stored away somewhere, and we kind of let their memory and stuff kind of like fade away. So this is just kind of like a way to like keep their memory alive, still give them respect, and just acknowledge them. So another way that we use the altar is to help elevate our ancestors, right? So when you think about hoodoo and you think about some of the ancestors that we are showing reverence to, you realize like some of these ancestors, they have been enslaved, right? And the hardships didn't just start and stop at enslavement. Like when you look at history and all of the things and all of the different eras, you realize like they dealt with other types of hardships, and they dealt with having to be systematically marginalized. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of the people that came before me left this earth broken, spiritually broken. So with them leaving this earth spiritually broken, I'm pretty sure they left this earth spiritually weakened, right? And so I feel like it is my job to help elevate them so they can be where they need to be. Because when our ancestors are at a place where they need to be, they can better help us, they can better guide us, they can better protect us, they can better bless us, they can better just be able to just do different things for us. And I feel like it's only right, because I feel like I kind of owe my life, not in a literal sense, but like just owe my life to helping elevate them, because they sacrificed so much for me while they were on earth. Like they missed out on certain things, they experienced certain things that, you know, in this life I'm not necessarily experiencing those things. If anything, I'm reaping the benefits of the things that they sacrificed. So it's only right that I help elevate them, and I help them vicariously like live through me and see the things that they sacrificed. And I even have my own little story Y'all know I always have like a little story. So my grandmother on my maternal side, when I started acknowledging my ancestors, she was the first one to actually appear in my dream, like literally right after I started acknowledging them and just saying like, hey, I'm here or whatever. She told me she was on the other side and this is what was going on, and basically she needed me to basically do something to help elevate her. I won't get into it, but I did what she asked me to help elevate her. And once I did that, months go by and I had like a milestone, a great milestone in my life. And so once that milestone happened, before it even happened actually, I had a dream that she came in my dream before this was even going to happen. Basically in a dream, it was my ancestor altar, and I had, at the time, I had a water from my paternal side and a glass of water from my maternal side. And so in the dream, there were basically like a tree growing out of the water that was on her side. So I knew the milestone that I just had and the blessing that I had just had at that time was because of my grandmother. And because I helped elevate her, she was able to help bless me and allow me to be where I needed to be at that time in my life. So that's why it's so important to help elevate your ancestors, and it's a really good place to do that at, by having that altar. Another reason to have the altar is to venerate your ancestors, right? So it's more than just like acknowledging them and honoring them, but it's like expressing that honor and acknowledgement that you have for them. Oh, excuse me. So like, you may cook Sunday dinner and you may set a plate aside for your ancestors and put it on their altar. That is a way of venerating them. You may go to your altar one day and give them cigarettes or a cigar. Like if you knew like, okay, my grandfather, he liked this type of cigar, or they like smoking these type of cigarettes. You might go to your altar and put something on there that is like a remembrance to them, to show like, hey, like, this is how I'm venerating you, right? So there's just like, honestly, there's just so many different ways that you can venerate your ancestors, and it doesn't even have to be at the altar, right? Because remember what I was saying, like the altar is just a place that's convenient, but all the stuff you can do outside of an altar, right? And sometimes it's even not even what you're giving them, but how you're showing up in the world, you know? Like when you're on your spiritual journey and you're elevating your own self and getting closer to the divine and on your spiritual path and having like good character everywhere you go, that is a way of venerating your ancestors, right? It's not so much like black and white. There's just so many different ways that you can venerate your ancestors. Another one is communication. So we use it to communicate with our ancestors, and you know, really utilize it and communicate. Like you can literally go to your altar and just tell your ancestors about your day or what you're going through. And a lot of times when you go to your altar and talk to your ancestors about whatever problems you have going on, a lot of the times if they don't respond back right in that moment, sometimes they'll respond back in a different way. Like they'll play on your abilities to respond back to you in a different way. So it's really good to go to that altar and talk to them, because a lot of times they will respond back to you, and it makes you feel lighter too when you just have like things going on and you kind of just get it off your chest and just talk to your ancestors and they respond back and oftentimes help the situation that you're in. So definitely communicate with your ancestors as a way to like just really get to know them better, and for them to get to know you better, as well as allowing them to know what's going on in your life. Of course, they're with you all the time, so they know what's happening in your life, but it's really good to just have that relationship and be able to talk to them. And then the other one is just simply protection, being able to protect you, being able to protect your home, protect you wherever you're at. And so when you're doing all of those things that I mentioned, as far as like just showing reverence and venerating and communicating, you know, really just feeding into them, they're going to show up and protect you too in the ways that you need to be protected. So really this video is kind of geared towards people who are just coming into their journey within Hoodoo and wondering, okay, well, is it the right time for me to get an altar? Should I get an altar? Really, it just really just depends on just many different variables, because like I said in the beginning, everything you can do at an altar, you can do outside of an altar, right? And I only say that because once you get this space, you have to make sure that you're dedicated to actually maintaining it. And we'll get into maintenance later, but just making sure you're dedicated to maintaining it, being there, and not neglecting it. And so just having that strong spiritual discipline, this is just my opinion. And so there's just many different variables to that. And I always feel like when it comes to like spirituality, I feel like a lot of times you should just flow, you know, with your journey, and not never kind of force anything, or never like looking at the next person that may be on a similar path, and not necessarily like comparing yourself to the next person, and just kind of going with the flow of things, if that makes sense. Because I feel like when you kind of align with where the universe is taking you, it will just feel right when it feels right, if that makes sense. So like, even for me myself, I haven't always had ancestor altar within my hoodoo journey, right? Just a little background. I grew up both spiritual and religious. That is a thing. I grew up both spiritual and religious. That's how my mom raised us. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that my mom was like from the country. So she had like her spiritual gifts and her spiritual practice, and things that she believed and things that she did that we saw. Like, I was literally very young knowing how to write a petition, right? Because my mom was spiritual, but she was also religious. So those two things usually exist, especially in the country, because you have to think about it. Economically, a lot of people are poor in the country, and they survive in the country off of hoodoo. And when you think back on like slavery and how it was in the South, the reason that a lot of our ancestors were able to survive was through hoodoo. And so like, of course, when like the Great Migration happened and more, you know, African Americans started moving north, some of those people, they left behind like some of the things from like the South, but some people had to keep those things. So that's why it's very much alive like in the South, especially like in the country. So I say all that to say, like, even though I was raised knowing a lot about hoodoo and doing hoodoo and stuff like that and seeing it done, we didn't have like the ancestral part. And I think a lot of that has to do with kind of just lost history, because as you know, like when slavery happened, people were not able to practice their spiritual practices, so they had to hide it in Christianity, and they had to hide it behind the religion that was brought onto them, which was Christianity. And so I feel like just throughout generations, there's like that lost knowing of that, and that's the reason why so many people, especially like in the country, are both like spiritual and religious. And so because of that lost history, I don't think she really knew about like the ancestors or used the ancestors within her practices. And so I never even knew about like having an altar or whatever for them, but I did know about, you know, a lot of other stuff. So by the time I was 18, y'all, at this time I had been to therapy, and it was something about going to therapy that was very like spiritual for me. It spiritually elevated me in a sense. And I'm not trying to go into like the deconstruction of religion and how I deconstructed that, because that's what this video is not about. But I will, because I'm trying to get to the point that I'm trying to make. But what I'm trying to say is, like, there was something spiritual that happened with me going to therapy, and I wanted more of that, because I knew whatever that feeling was, whatever I got from that, I was going to be able to grow as a person and evolve in a way that religion was kind of restricting me. At this point, I'm kind of just growing into who I am, and at that point I kind of felt like the way that I think, the way that I move, certain values that I hold, certain convictions that I've made based off of my own life experiences just does not align with religion, and religion is not allowing me to grow in the way that I would want to. And that's not to say that, you know, for the next person, being a part of religion will not allow them to grow. I feel like everybody has their own journey in life, but it just wasn't for me. And so that is when I started really just, okay, deconstructing religion. Again, this video is not about that, but I just say all that to say, like, I just wanted more, basically, right? And in my last video, how I told you, like, when it comes to hoodoo, a lot of the times, like along your journey, you'll meet different people that'll help you along the way. So I would say when I was in college, you guys, I had a professor, and I would say this professor basically catapulted me in the direction of being able to bring my ancestors into like my spiritual practice and really get deeper into hoodoo. And so in college, I had an African studies class, and my professor and the professor, oh my gosh, like this guy was so amazing. He was like a walking history book. Like he had so much knowledge over like African history and African American history and Pan-Africanism and all that kind of stuff. So I really took a liking to him, and at one point I had the opportunity to just kind of be vulnerable and open up and, you know, just explain about stuff in my life and like my spiritual practices and my religious background and stuff like that. And I also learned that he too was spiritual. And so eventually I ended up following him on Instagram because he was like one of those professors that was just really likable, and a lot of students, you know, liked him. He had a name for himself and stuff in the city. Like he was just a really great guy. And so I just followed him on social media. He was doing too much. He was doing too much. Basically, I followed him on social media, and I seen that he had like an ancestor altar with his ancestors on it, and I just took note of that. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But it was something about seeing that that kind of made me, at a sense, want to explore more of that. And so I didn't just automatically just start an ancestor altar. No, that's not what I did. So when I seen that, I think it was maybe like a couple of days later, I was like, you know what? I want to start acknowledging my ancestors, right? Because just taking his class, it just made me have a deeper respect and stuff for my ancestors. When I'm learning about like history and stuff, if anybody know me, like history is like one of my favorite subjects. So I don't know, it just kind of gave me a new look on things, and it kind of like that class and him kind of just kind of shaped me in a sense, like helped shape me who I am today. So one day I literally just called on my ancestors and just acknowledged them and just started talking to them. And so from there, I didn't automatically get an altar, right? I didn't want to jump into that. But eventually, as time went on, maybe like a couple months later, that is when I started really just getting into like wanting to have a deeper relationship with my ancestors, and that is when I started to have my altar. So it wasn't just something I learned about and I immediately, okay, let me just get an altar, but it was just something that kind of aligned and came together, and I met the right person that kind of introduced me to that as well. And I got better with my spiritual discipline to know like, okay, you know what, I feel like at this time I'm ready to have this altar. And I feel like my spirit team and God knew I was ready to have an altar, and that is why things in the events happened in the way that it did. So I basically say all that to say, like, do it when it feels right, right? Oh my God. I hope I did not talk for so long that it was just like, girl. But yeah, I had to say all that to just get to the point of like, do it when it feels right. And so if you're at the point where you feel like, you know what, I feel like I'm at a space now where I'm spiritually disciplined enough to have an altar, then this is where I'm gonna get into like, okay, how to start your altar, what you should have on it, and how to maintain it, right? So as far as like the location, because that's kind of the first thing, is the location. So when it comes to the location, ideally you want to put it in a place that's discreet, right? Or it's kind of like tucked away, it's not really out in the open. But you know, depending on your space and where you're living, sometimes that's not as ideal. And so just put it where you can, if that makes sense. But kind of refrain from trying to put it right next to the door where, you know, like a lot of people are coming in and out. And when it comes to like the bedroom, that is another one. And I feel like that's kind of subjective upon like your own ancestors, right? Because some ancestors may be okay with being in your bedroom, and then some ancestors may not. So I feel like whether or not it can be in your bedroom, because that is a big one that people often ask, that's really dependent upon you and your ancestors. Like, are you comfortable with an ancestor altar being in your bedroom, and are they comfortable with it being in your bedroom, right? Because when it comes to them, one thing about your ancestors, they will let you know when they're not pleased with something, and when they're not happy about something, they will find a way to get it to you, right? So if you put one in your bedroom and you realize, like, okay, they're showing me signs that they're not happy with this, then, you know, just dismantle it. And if you're not able to put it elsewhere, then maybe it's just not the time to have it, if that makes sense. Because I do know, like, sometimes people, they want to put it in their bedroom because, you know, maybe they live with people that they wouldn't necessarily approve of it, or maybe like they just rather have it tucked away in their bedroom, right? So it just really depends on them and how they feel. But a lot of the times they're understanding, and a lot of the times if they have an issue with it, they will let you know. And then there's also that side of you, like, are you comfortable with having an ancestor altar in your room? Because you have to think of it like your bedroom is a very intimate place, and you have to think about the type of energy that can be created in a bedroom, whether it's the things that you do inside your bedroom. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Like, there's different things that you can do inside your bedroom that's very intimate, whether it's with yourself or with other people, you know what I'm saying? So it can create a certain type of energy. So just be mindful of that, and be mindful of the fact that an ancestor altar is a portal, so you have to maintain it and keep it sacred and blessed and all of those different things, right? So just keep those things in mind. So once you find a location, then it's more so about like putting it together, as far as like, what are you going to put on it, right? So when you first get the table or whatever you're using for that to be the sacred place, you want to cleanse and bless the space, right? So a lot of the times, because even once you get it, you still have to keep it cleansed and blessed, right? So probably like 2 times out of the month, I do a deep cleaning of my ancestor altar. So basically I dismantle it and start it back over again, if that makes sense. So I'll just cleanse it. I'll get some type of smoke that I want to use, and I'll just cleanse the area. And then I'll get my Florida water, and I'll get a paper towel, and as I am wiping it down, I am blessing and cleansing this space. And I literally say that out loud, like, I am cleansing and blessing this space for my ancestors who have my best interest. And so the next thing that you want to do is get your pictures. Of course, you know, you're going to be honoring the ancestors, both known and unknown, who have your best interest, because yes, you have to say that when you I'll explain it later, but yes, you have to say that, right? Because not every ancestor is going to have your best interest, so you have to be intentional about that. But when you realize, okay, these are the ancestors that I want to work with, or these are the ancestors that have been wanting to work with me, get their pictures and frame it and put it on there, right? You're going to have those on your altar, pictures of them. If for whatever reason, you know, you don't have a picture of your ancestors, you can always write down their names and put it on there, or write it down and put it like in a frame or shoebox or whatever, if you don't have their picture. And if you don't know their names, right? Because sometimes you don't necessarily know their names. Sometimes the ancestors that are really working directly with you, sometimes they'll tell you their names later. It just depends, right? I have heard of people putting like a plant on their altar to represent their family lineage and stuff like that. So there's ways, right? So you just want to have something that represents like, hey, these are the ancestors that I'm working with. So when it comes to what you will actually put on the ancestor altar, you will need the basics first, right? You need your base of what you're going to put on there. All of the other stuff that can grow with time, but you want to have a base of what you're going to put on there. And in Hoodoo, you basically follow like the elements, right? So you want to have something of each element that represents what's on the altar, if that makes sense. So like, you're gonna have your fire, you're gonna have the thing that represents water, you're gonna have the thing that represents earth, you're gonna have the thing that represents air. That is like the base. So for your fire, you're gonna have a candle, right? You're gonna put a candle, preferably I use a white candle that I use on my ancestor altar, and I just place it on there. And so when you actually light that candle, that is a way for your ancestors to be guided to that light, into that space, right? So the next element is water. So you'll have a glass of water on your altar, and the water is basically a conduit to help like have that communication with your ancestors, if that makes sense. And a lot of times when you put a glass of water on your altar, you'll see like bubbles in the water, and that really just shows like, okay, my ancestors are present. So a lot of times after you put that glass of water, you will see bubbles in it. So when it comes to the element of air, I recommend a feather, a bell, and a knife. Me personally, I have both a bell and a knife. A knife to represent protection, and then a bell that actually gives off a certain frequency too. So when I light the candle and I start jingling the bell, the ancestors, they actually like that frequency, they actually like that sound, and it also helps with steering them to the altar, if that makes sense. Then the last element, which is earth. So you could have something that represents earth, such as a crystal, right, or a plant, or something of your ancestors that they had, or something that you know, like, okay, you know what, while they were on earth, they like this, and this will, you know, this is kind of a remembrance of them, so I'm going to put this on their altar or whatever. So things like that. And as you get to learn about your ancestors and know more about them, whether it's through them or through asking other people in your family, your ancestor altar will grow. So kind of focus on having like the necessities, which is the 4 elements and stuff like that, and then work on actually growing your ancestor altar as time go on. Like for me, I just kind of grow it with the things that I know about them and have in things that I've asked and learned about them. So like, for example, my grandfather, his favorite candy was like these peppermint, I don't even know the name of it. I just know how it looks when I see it, but it's like a peppermint candy, but it's not actual peppermint, but it's like, it's hard to explain. I'll see if I can find a picture and post it. But that was his favorite candy, so I have that on there. My grandmother, she loved cigarettes and stuff like that, so I've had that on there. If you know, like, if you know what type of liquor that your ancestors like, you could put whiskey on there or whatever. I even have things like a rosary on there and holy water, because, and even though I have deconstructed Christianity, right, the base of hoodoo is still Christianity, and it's still the ancestors, because they hid everything through Christianity, right? And so even though I've deconstructed it, I still show those concepts within my hoodoo practices, and I still have reverence for Jesus, right? Because I'm able to see through certain things from a spiritual lens. So like for me, much like the Muslims, I don't believe that Jesus is like a god or anything. I feel like I feel like Jesus was another person, and just like you and me. So I'm more into like the Christ consciousness. I still work with angels, you know, all of those things. Like, even though I deconstructed religion, I'm still able to see through it to still work with the Bible and maybe like different angels and stuff like that. Because don't sleep on Jesus. Like Jesus energy on the other side, I know this is like a side note, but it's very protective, right? And those times when because I mentioned in a different video how like I dealt with like low vibrational entities at one point. A lot of the times when I would hear those low vibrational entities, I would say, I rebuke it in the name of Jesus, and those entities would literally just be gone, right? So his energy is very strong on the other side. And so just because, you know, they westernized Christianity and altered and things and made it in a way that could be used in a negative way, don't let that discourage you as well, to utilize to work with Jesus or whatever, because as you know, like the base of Hoodoo is Christianity. So without utilizing Christianity and without utilizing the ancestors, you're not practicing Hoodoo. So just keep that in mind. But I just say all that to say, like, yeah, I have holy water and a rosary and stuff like that on my altar, and it's not just because it's the base, but also because a lot of my ancestors, especially on my maternal side, they're from like the south of Alabama, and then I have some from like the north of Florida and stuff like that. So yeah, I just incorporate it, right? And so when you're done with all that, basically what you will do is light the candle, and you'll say like, hey, this space is for my ancestors, both known and unknown, who have my best interests. And you're pretty much done. And me personally, I don't like leaving the candle lit unless I'm at the candle, because again, it is a portal. So once I do whatever I have to do at the altar, when I'm away from that altar, I make sure I take that fire out, right? And just with maintaining it, that's the last thing I wanted to go over. Just make sure that you maintain your altar. So what I mean by that is don't neglect it, right? So go to it, show reverence, speak to them, venerate them, elevate them, and most importantly, keep it clean, right? I have my own schedule. Like before the month starts, I have a schedule of like just different things I want to do within that week, within the different weeks, when it comes to like my spiritual practices and things I want to do spiritually. I just like to stay organized in that way. And so things that I put on there is, okay, I want to do a deep clean. So I might do every other week, I might do a deep clean of the ancestor altar, where it's where I like actually dismantle it and then put it back together. But every week I might change out that water, right? So make sure you're changing out that water, and make sure even throughout the week that you're checking the water, right? Because you could let your window up and dust or pollen or whatever come inside and makes the water kind of like crumbly and foggy and stuff. So just be mindful of that, to just check it throughout, or you might have like a little bug might get in there or something. You just never know. So just make sure, like, even though you're changing the water weekly, make sure you're also checking to make sure ain't nothing in there throughout the week as well. And another thing with the altar is part of maintaining it and making sure that, you know, it's treated as such a sacred place is having boundaries with people when they come over, when it comes to your altar, right? So like if you have to let people know, like, hey, this is, you know, a space that I have from my ancestors, just try not to put anything over it and try not to touch anything. Like me personally, I don't mind telling anybody about like my altar or whatever if they come over, but I don't want anyone touching it, and I don't want anyone putting their stuff on it. I think that's just very rude. And sometimes people are not aware enough to be like, hey, there's actually space dedicated to somebody, family members, I shouldn't put anything on it. But if you have to tell people that, then, you know, tell people that, because some people may not be aware, and then some people are just, you know, they could intentionally do that, because some people literally live to trigger other people. So that's another thing, just being mindful who you let in your house. So yeah, there's that. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, just let me know, you guys.